The notification pinged on my phone at exactly 3:15 on a Tuesday afternoon. Property alert. Unauthorized entry at Riverside Penthouse. My hand froze halfway to my coffee cup. I stared at the screen, my heart starting to pound. Nobody should be at that apartment. Nobody even knew I owned it except my lawyer and my accountant. I'd purchased the $20 million penthouse 2 years ago under my company's name, kept it pristine and empty, a symbol of everything I'd built in secret while playing the role of Trevor's supportive wife. My fingers trembled as I opened the security app on my phone. The cameras I'd installed were top of the line, streaming in crystal clear quality. What I saw on the screen made my blood run cold. Trevor, my husband of 8 years, stood in the living room of my apartment, his arm around a woman I'd never seen before. She was young, maybe 25, with long blonde hair and a very obvious baby bump under her fitted dress. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was watching Trevor spread his arms wide, gesturing around the space like he owned it. I turned up the volume on my phone, pressing it close to my ear. "Welcome home, baby," Trevor's voice came through clear as day. "This is all ours now. $20 million of pure luxury, and it's all for you and our son." The woman, whoever she was, squealed with delight and threw her arms around his neck. "Trevor, I can't believe this is real. How did you manage to afford something like this? I thought you said money was tight because of the divorce proceedings." My stomach turned over. Divorce proceedings? What divorce proceedings? Trevor laughed, that charming laugh I'd fallen in love with a decade ago. "Let's just say I've been smarter than Gabrielle gives me credit for. While she's been busy playing consultant and traveling for work, I've been closing deals and making moves. This apartment is just the beginning. Once the divorce is finalized, we'll have everything we need. The company, the assets, everything." I had to grip the edge of my desk to keep from screaming. I sat in my private office, the one in the building I actually owned 3 blocks away from this apartment, and watched my husband promise another woman a future in a home that belonged to me. The woman walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, her hand resting on her swollen belly. "It's so beautiful. I can't wait to bring our baby here. To start our real life together." She turned back to Trevor, her eyes shining. "When will you tell her? When will you tell Gabrielle it's over?" Trevor moved behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Soon, Courtney. Very soon. My lawyer is drawing up the papers now. I've made sure everything is structured so she walks away with almost nothing. She'll be too shocked to fight it properly. By the time she realizes what happened, you and I will be living here, raising our son, and she'll be ancient history." I watched Courtney lean back against him, a satisfied smile on her face. I almost feel bad for her. Almost. But she should have paid more attention to her husband. A man like you needs appreciation. You deserve someone who sees your worth. They kissed, right there in my living room, and I had to close my eyes for a moment to breathe through the rage building in my chest. When I looked again, Trevor was showing her through the apartment, opening doors to bedrooms I'd never slept in, the gourmet kitchen I'd never cooked in, the master bathroom with its infinity tub overlooking the city. Every word out of his mouth was a lie, every promise a fantasy built on property that belonged to me. "The closing happened last week," Trevor said as they toured the master bedroom. "The previous owner was desperate to sell. Got it for a steal at $20 million. Can you imagine? This place was listed at 28. I almost laughed out loud. I knew exactly what it was listed at because I was the one who'd purchased it at full price 2 years ago. There had been no desperate seller, no stealing deal. Just me buying property under my corporate name while Trevor thought I was out of town on business." Courtney ran her hand along the marble countertop in the bathroom. "It's perfect. Everything is absolutely perfect. Our baby is going to grow up in paradise." She paused, turning to Trevor with a slight frown. "You're sure Gabrielle doesn't know about any of this? About us, about the baby, about this apartment?" "Trust me," Trevor said, pulling her close again. "Gabrielle is clueless. She's so focused on her little consulting gigs and her spreadsheets, she hasn't noticed I've been planning our future for months. She thinks I'm at the office late every night. She has no idea I've been with you building something real." I saved the video file, my hands steady now despite the fury coursing through my veins. My mind was already working, already calculating. Trevor thought he was smart. He thought he'd been playing me while building a secret life. What he didn't know was that while he'd been having his affair, I'd been building an empire. An empire he knew nothing about. The consulting work he thought was my cute little hobby? That was actually property acquisition and management. The business trips he thought were unnecessary? Those were closings on multi-million-dollar deals. The spreadsheets he mocked? Those tracked a real estate portfolio worth over $50 million, all built from the initial investment his family had given us 8 years ago. Money they'd entrusted to me to manage. Money they thought was sitting in safe, boring index funds. Money that had actually been turned into property after property after property, each one purchased under my corporation, each one completely separate from Trevor and our marriage. On my phone screen, Trevor and Courtney had moved back to the living room. They were opening a bottle of champagne. My champagne from the wine fridge I'd stocked before I'd decided the apartment wasn't quite right for me to actually move into. To us, Trevor said, raising his glass. To our future, to our son, and to finally being free to love each other the way we deserve. To us, Courtney echoed, clinking her glass against his. I watched them drink my champagne in my apartment while planning to steal my life, and something cold and sharp settled in my chest. Not heartbreak. I'd moved past loving Trevor somewhere around year 5 when I realized he saw me as an accessory rather than a partner. No, what I felt was clarity. Trevor wanted to play games with property and money? Fine. He just moved into the one piece of real estate that would destroy him. He just brought his pregnant mistress into the apartment that would expose everything. And the best part? He had absolutely no idea. I picked up my phone and dialed my lawyer. Patricia? It's Gabrielle. I need you to pull all documentation on the Riverside penthouse property. Every document, every closing paper, every piece of proof that I own it. Then I need you to start proceedings for something else. What do you need? Patricia asked, her voice all business. I smiled, watching Trevor kiss Courtney on my camera screen. I need you to help me destroy my husband's entire life. And I need it all to be completely legal. I'm listening, Patricia said. Good, I replied. Because class is now in session, and Trevor is about to learn what happens when you underestimate your wife. The coffee shop near my office had become my thinking spot over the years. I sat by the window now, laptop open, reviewing files that told a story Trevor would never believe. The story of how his oblivious wife had become wealthier than his entire family combined. It started 8 years ago, 3 months after our wedding. Trevor's parents had called us into their study, so formal and serious that I'd been nervous. His father had slid an envelope across the mahogany desk. We want to give you young people a proper start, he'd said. $500,000. Invest it wisely. Trevor had barely glanced at it. Thanks, Dad. We'll put it in stocks or whatever Gabrielle thinks is best. She's good with numbers. He'd said it dismissively, already thinking about the golf game he was missing. His mother had looked at me directly. Gabrielle, dear, we're entrusting this to you. Trevor has never been interested in financial planning. Make it grow. Keep it safe. I promised I would. What they didn't know was that I'd minored in finance and real estate in college. While Trevor had been coasting through business school on his family name, I'd been studying property markets, investment strategies, and wealth building. Not because I had any money of my own. I'd grown up in a small apartment with a single mother who taught me that financial independence was everything. That $500,000 was my chance. I'd taken 3 months to study the local real estate market. While Trevor thought I was planning dinner parties and shopping, I was attending property auctions, networking with investors, and learning everything I could. Then I'd found it, a foreclosed duplex in an up-and-coming neighborhood. Everyone else saw a disaster. I saw potential. I'd bought it for $200,000, spent another $50,000 on renovations I'd managed myself, and flipped it 6 months later for $400,000. $100,000 profit on my first deal. Trevor had never asked about the money. When I told him I'd made a good investment, he'd patted my head like I was a child who'd gotten a gold star and gone back to watching sports. That patronizing pat had been the moment something in me hardened. I'd taken that profit and bought 2 more properties. Then 4. Then 8. Each time I'd renovated, improved, and either sold for profit or kept as rental properties. I'd created an LLC, Monarch Property Group, and moved everything under that corporate umbrella. Completely legal. Completely separate from our marriage. Trevor's family had given us that money to invest jointly, but they'd put it in my name. The account was mine. Every property I'd purchased was purchased by Monarch Property Group, which I solely owned. My lawyer had made absolutely certain of that from the beginning. Always protect yourself, Patricia had told me during our first meeting. Especially when your husband doesn't pay attention to money you're managing. I'd listened. Every document, every closing, every single transaction had my name or my company's name on it. Never Trevor's. He'd been so disinterested in what I was doing that he'd never even asked to see paperwork. By year 3 of our marriage, I turned that $500,000 into $2 million. By year 5 it was $10 million. By year 7, $20 million. Now, sitting in this coffee shop reviewing my portfolio, I was looking at assets worth over $52 million. $52 million that Trevor knew absolutely nothing about. He thought I was a consultant. That part was technically true. I consulted on property acquisitions for other investors. But what he thought was my job was actually just a side project. My real work was managing my empire. The business trips were property viewings and closings. The late nights at the office were negotiations and renovations. The spreadsheets were tracking rental income from 37 properties across 4 states. I'd been so careful. Separate bank accounts for the business. A corporate credit card he'd never seen. Tax returns filed separately, something I'd convinced him was better for his family's complicated holdings. He'd signed whatever I'd put in front of him without reading it. My mother would have been proud. She'd raised me alone after my father had left us with nothing, working 3 jobs to keep us afloat. Never depend on a man for money, she told me over and over. Build your own security. Trust yourself. I'd taken that lesson to heart. Even as I'd played the supportive wife, hosting Trevor's business dinners and attending his family events, I'd been building my own foundation. A foundation he couldn't touch, couldn't claim, couldn't take. The Riverside penthouse had been my celebration purchase. After closing a particularly complex deal that had netted me nearly $3 million in profit, I decided to buy something extraordinary. Something just for me. I'd planned to eventually tell Trevor about it, maybe use it as a reveal of everything I'd accomplished. Look what I built while you weren't paying attention. Instead, he'd somehow found out about it, probably through his family's real estate connections, and decided to claim it as his own. He'd even researched enough to know the purchase price. But he hadn't researched enough to know who actually owned it. That mistake was going to cost him everything. My phone buzzed. A text from the property management company. Additional entry logged at Riverside Penthouse. Same individuals as yesterday. Duration, 4 hours. 4 hours. Trevor was spending 4 hours in my apartment with his pregnant mistress while I sat here planning his destruction. The irony was beautiful. I opened my email and began composing messages. First, to my accountant, I need complete documentation of all Monarch Property Group assets, including founding documents showing sole ownership. Also need documentation of the original $500,000 investment and its growth trajectory. Second, to my private investigator, need complete background on Courtney Anderson. Employment, financial status, relationship history. Also need surveillance on Trevor Bennett's movements and any financial irregularities in his business dealings. Third, to Patricia, meeting needed ASAP. Divorce proceedings will be complicated. Bringing documentation of all separate assets. Also need to discuss potential fraud issues regarding Trevor's claims about property he doesn't own. I'd learned over 8 years of property deals that success came from preparation. You researched everything, documented everything, and never made a move until you knew every angle. Trevor was about to learn that the wife he'd dismissed as a numbers girl had become a strategic player he couldn't match. My laptop pinged with an email response from Patricia. Can meet tomorrow morning. Bam. Bring everything. This sounds like it's going to be interesting. Interesting was one word for it. Devastating was another. Satisfying was probably the most accurate. I closed my laptop and looked out the window at the city I'd conquered while Trevor hadn't been paying attention. Somewhere out there, in my $20 million apartment, he was making promises to Courtney about a future built on lies. He was planning to divorce me and leave me with nothing. What he didn't understand was that I didn't need anything from him. I'd already built more than he ever would. His family's money, the money they'd trusted me to invest, had grown into an empire that dwarfed anything the Bennett family had ever achieved. And tomorrow I'd start the process of making sure he knew it. Making sure everyone knew it. Trevor wanted a divorce where I walked away with nothing? Fine. He could have that divorce. But he'd be the one walking away with nothing while I kept everything I'd built. The best revenge wasn't anger. It was success. And I'd spent 8 years building the most successful revenge imaginable. Now it was time to unveil it. The electronics store clerk looked at me with barely concealed curiosity as I purchased my 6th security camera. Building a fortress? He joked. Something like that, I replied with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I'd spent the last 3 days upgrading every security measure in the Riverside penthouse. The property management company had been more than happy to grant me access. After all, I owned the building. What they didn't ask was why the owner needed to install additional cameras in her own apartment. Smart people didn't ask questions. I'd positioned cameras in every room now, all hidden behind artwork or tucked into corners where they blended with the modern design. Audio recording in every space. motion sensors that alerted me the moment anyone entered. Trevor thought he'd found a private love nest. Instead, he'd moved into the most surveilled apartment in the city. The footage from the last week had been enlightening and infuriating in equal measure. Monday afternoon, 3 p.m., Trevor and Courtney entering together. He'd clearly given her a key because she'd opened the door herself, laughing about how this was their secret palace. They'd spent 2 hours in the bedroom. I'd watched enough to document their presence and relationship, then fast-forwarded through the rest. I didn't need to torture myself with details. Tuesday evening, 7 p.m., Trevor alone this time talking on his phone. "Yeah, Mom, I'm at the office. Big project. Might be here late." Meanwhile, he was sitting on my couch, feet up on my coffee table, drinking my whiskey. After the call, he'd made another one. "Hey baby, coast is clear. Gabrielle thinks I'm working late. Come over around 8. Courtney had arrived at 8:15. They'd ordered takeout, charged to a credit card I didn't recognize. That had sent me down a rabbit hole. Wednesday morning, I'd met with my private investigator, James Chin. No, wait, can't use Chin. James Morrison. He'd spread documents across his desk with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. "Your husband has 3 credit cards you don't know about," James said, pointing to printouts. "Total debt across all 3, $270,000. And that's just what I've found so far." My hands had gone cold. How is that possible? His family's company pays him nearly $300,000 a year. Which is where it gets interesting. James had slid another document toward me. I pulled his employment records. His salary was $300,000. Was past tense. 6 months ago, the board reduced it to $150,000 after some questionable expense reports. He's been living off credit cards and what appears to be cash advances from the company account. Cash advances? My stomach had twisted. That's embezzlement. Not technically, not yet. He's an executive with discretionary access to certain funds. But the amounts are suspicious. $50,000 here, $30,000 there. Always listed as business expenses but never properly documented. I've got a source inside the accounting department who says the new CFO has been asking questions. I'd leaned back in my chair, processing. Trevor wasn't just cheating. He was stealing from his own family's company to fund his affair. The apartment he thought he could afford? The promises he was making to Courtney? All built on debt and fraud. "There's more," James had said, pulling out another file. "The offshore accounts you asked about? Found 2. Both in the Cayman Islands. Combined balance of approximately $400,000. Money transferred in small increments over the past 18 months. "Let me guess," I'd said. "He's been hiding money from the marriage to make sure I don't get it in the divorce." That would be my assessment. Smart Money says he's planning to claim poverty in divorce proceedings while sitting on hidden assets. Smart Money. Trevor had always thought he was the smart one in our marriage. The one with the business degree from the expensive school. The one from the successful family. Meanwhile, he'd been committing fraud and hiding assets with all the subtlety of an amateur. Now back in my office, I watched the live feed from the apartment. Thursday afternoon, 2:30 p.m. Trevor and Courtney were there again. This time she'd brought paint samples. "I'm thinking a soft blue for the nursery," Courtney was saying, holding up swatches against the wall of the second bedroom. "Something calm and soothing. What do you think?" Trevor had wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his hands on her stomach. "Whatever you want, baby. This is your house. Make it perfect for our son." Her house. Our son. Every word was a knife. Not because I wanted Trevor back. That ship had sailed years ago when I'd realized he saw me as a prop rather than a partner. But because of the casual cruelty of it. The assumption that he could just erase me, replace me, take what was mine and give it to someone else. Courtney had turned in his arms, her expression serious. "When will you tell her?" "Really tell her? The baby is due in 4 months. I don't want to be hiding when our son is born." "Soon," Trevor had promised. "My lawyer is finalizing the divorce papers. It's all about timing. If I file now while she thinks everything is fine, she won't have time to hide assets or prepare. By the time she realizes what's happening, it'll be too late." I'd actually laughed out loud at that. Hide assets. As if I had anything to hide. Meanwhile, he was the one with secret credit cards, hidden offshore accounts, and embezzled money. What about her finding out about this place? Courtney had asked, gesturing around the apartment. "Impossible," Trevor had said confidently. "The apartment is under a corporate name. Even if she somehow found out it exists, she'd never connect it to me. As far as anyone knows, I'm renting it through a private arrangement." By the time everything comes out, we'll be legally protected. A corporate name. My corporate name. Monarch Property Group. The company I'd built from nothing while he'd been coasting on his family's reputation. The beautiful, perfect irony of it all. I'd scheduled a meeting for Friday morning with Trevor's parents. Well, not Trevor's parents directly, that would have tipped him off. Instead, I'd reached out through my real estate connections, suggesting they might be interested in an investment property that had just become available. A penthouse with spectacular views and significant appreciation potential. They jumped at it. The Bennett family had been looking to diversify their portfolio after some losses in the stock market. A $20 million property in a prime location, offered to them by a respected property investment firm, was exactly what they wanted to hear about. The viewing was scheduled for Saturday at noon. I checked Trevor's calendar, something I could easily do since he was terrible about password protection. Saturday at noon, he'd scheduled lunch with potential clients. In reality, according to his text messages with Courtney, he was planning a romantic brunch at the apartment. Perfect timing. Friday evening, I sat in my real office, the one in the building I owned 3 blocks from the penthouse, and reviewed my evidence. Video footage of Trevor bringing Courtney to the apartment at least 8 times over the past 2 weeks. Audio recordings of him promising her a future, discussing divorce plans, dismissing me as clueless. Financial records showing his debt, his hidden accounts, his questionable company expenses. Documentation proving I owned the Riverside penthouse and had owned it for 2 years. My phone rang. Patricia. I've reviewed everything you sent, she said without preamble. This is even better than I thought. He's committed fraud, both marital fraud by hiding assets and corporate fraud by misappropriating company funds. His family could press charges if they wanted to. I'm not interested in sending him to prison, I said. I'm interested in making sure he walks away from this marriage with exactly what he deserves. Nothing. That won't be hard. The prenup he insisted on works entirely in your favor. It protects premarital and separately acquired assets. Since you built your entire portfolio using money that was legally given to you to invest, and you invested it under your own corporation, none of it is marital property. He can't touch it. And the hidden offshore accounts? Those will have to be disclosed in the divorce. When they are, it'll prove he was trying to defraud you. That'll play very well for us. The judge won't be sympathetic. I smiled. Good. And the apartment? That's my favorite part. He's been using your property to conduct his affair. When this comes out, when his parents and company board see him there with his pregnant mistress, he won't have a leg to stand on. Morally, legally, or financially. The viewing is tomorrow at noon. I'll be there, Patricia said. This is going to be spectacular. After we hung up, I sat in my office and watched the live feed one more time. Trevor and Courtney weren't there tonight. But I could see the paint samples still sitting on the kitchen counter. The bottle of prenatal vitamins next to the sink. The ultrasound photo stuck to the refrigerator with a magnet. They'd been building a home in my apartment. Planning a future with my property. Making promises with money Trevor didn't have while plotting to take everything from me. Tomorrow all of that would end. Tomorrow Trevor would learn what it meant to underestimate the woman he'd dismissed as his numbers girl. Tomorrow the empire I'd built in secret would be revealed, and his house of cards would collapse. I saved all the footage one final time, backed it up to 3 separate secure locations, and sent copies to Patricia's encrypted server. Evidence preserved. Plans set. Trap baited. Now all I had to do was watch Trevor walk right into it. Saturday morning arrived cold and bright. I stood in my hotel room, a suite at the Four Seasons that cost more per night than Trevor knew I could afford, and selected my outfit with care. Charcoal gray suit, perfectly tailored. White silk blouse. Simple diamond earrings my mother had given me before she died. Professional. Powerful. Exactly who I'd become while Trevor wasn't paying attention. My phone showed 11:45 a.m. In 15 minutes, Trevor's parents and 3 board members from the Bennett family company would arrive at the Riverside penthouse for their private viewing. My property management company had sent confirmation texts throughout the morning. At 11:30, VIP guests confirmed for noon arrival. At 11:40, guests entering parking garage. 2 vehicles. Perfect. Everything was moving like clockwork. My other phone, the one monitoring the apartment security cameras, showed Trevor had arrived at 11:15. He'd been busy. The dining table was set with fancy plates I'd never seen before, probably bought with one of those secret credit cards. Candles everywhere. A bouquet of roses in the center. The champagne bucket was out again, chilling what looked like an expensive bottle. Courtney had arrived at 11:30, wearing a flowing blue dress that emphasized her pregnant belly. She'd squealed when she'd seen the setup, throwing her arms around Trevor's neck. "This is so beautiful. You're so romantic." Trevor had kissed her, then guided her to the couch. "Only the best for you and our boy. I wanted today to be special. A celebration of our future." "Have you filed the papers yet?" Courtney had asked, settling into the couch cushions. "Monday," Trevor had promised. "My lawyer has everything ready. By this time next week, the divorce will be in motion. 6 months from now, maybe less, we'll be free to get married ourselves." Watching them, I felt nothing. No heartbreak. No sadness. Just cold calculation and satisfaction. Every word they spoke was being recorded. Every promise Trevor made was documenting his betrayal. At 11:55, I received the final text. "Guests in elevator. Arriving at penthouse level." I pulled up the hallway camera feed on my phone. There they were. Trevor's parents, Robert and Margaret Bennett. 3 board members I recognized from company photos. James Peterson, Carol Zhang, and Thomas Wright. All of them dressed professionally, clearly taking this potential investment seriously. Patricia stood with them, playing her role as the property representative. "Thank you all for meeting on a Saturday. The owner is very selective about potential buyers and wanted to give you first opportunity before we list it publicly. 20 million is significant," Robert Bennett said. "But the location is prime. If the space lives up to the listing photos, the Bennett investment portfolio would benefit from this acquisition." Margaret Bennett nodded. "We've been looking for luxury property in this area. The appreciation potential is excellent." I watched Patricia nod and smile. She pulled out her key card. I'd given her full access as the owner's representative. She slid it through the reader. The door opened. On my phone, I split screen between the hallway camera and the interior apartment camera. Trevor and Courtney were at the dining table now, him pouring champagne, her laughing at something he'd said. Neither of them heard the door opening. Trevor had music playing softly in the background. Patricia stepped inside first, followed by the group. For a moment, everyone froze. The Bennett family and board members stared at the romantic scene before them. Trevor and Courtney at the table, champagne glasses raised in a toast, candles glowing, roses between them. Trevor's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion. Recognition. Horror. The champagne glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. "Mom? Dad?" His voice came out strangled. "What are you doing here?" Robert Bennett's expression had gone from professional to furious in seconds. "What are we doing here?" "What are you doing here, Trevor?" "This is a property viewing for a potential investment." Margaret Bennett's eyes had landed on Courtney, specifically on her very pregnant stomach. Her face went pale. "Trevor, who is this woman?" Trevor stood, nearly knocking over his chair. I can explain. I'm looking at the property too. For investment purposes." "Investment purposes," Robert repeated, his voice deadly calm. "With champagne and roses and a pregnant woman who's clearly not your wife? Where is Gabrielle?" I'd been watching this unfold on my phone, timing my entrance perfectly. Now, I stepped out of the hotel room and got into my car. The Riverside penthouse was 7 minutes away. I'd planned this timing down to the second. Back on my screen, Trevor was stammering. "This is just a lunch meeting. Courtney she's a friend. A colleague. We were discussing a business opportunity." "A business opportunity," Carol Zhang said, her voice ice cold. "Trevor, the table is set for 2. There are roses. You're drinking champagne with a pregnant woman while your wife is God knows where. Don't insult our intelligence." Courtney had gone very quiet, shrinking back in her chair. She looked between Trevor and his parents, clearly realizing something had gone very wrong. Patricia stepped forward, her voice professional and clear. "Perhaps I can clarify the situation. This apartment is owned by Monarch Property Group, a real estate investment corporation. The owner has owned this property for 2 years and has never authorized anyone else to access it. Mr. Bennett, do you have permission to be here?" Trevor's face flushed. "I arranged access through a real estate contact. The apartment was available for lease and I've been considering renting it." "That's interesting," Patricia said smoothly. "Because this apartment has never been available for lease. The owner has never authorized any rental arrangements. Mr. Bennett, how did you access this property?" Before Trevor could answer, I pulled into the parking garage. My timing was perfect. I rode the elevator up, my heart pounding but my expression calm. The elevator doors opened onto the penthouse hallway just as Patricia was asking her question. I walked toward the open apartment door, my heels clicking on the marble floor. I can answer that question, I said, stepping into the doorway. Every head turned toward me. Trevor's mother gasped. The board members looked confused. Courtney's eyes went wide. Trevor himself looked like he might pass out. Gabrielle, he whispered. Hello, Trevor. I walked into the apartment, my apartment, with my head high. Enjoying the space? I've always thought the natural light in here was spectacular. What are you doing here? Trevor's voice cracked on the words. I smiled at Trevor's parents. Mr. and Mrs. Bennett, it's good to see you. I apologize for the confusion. Let me introduce myself properly. I turned to Patricia. I'm Gabrielle Bennett, sole owner of Monarch Property Group and the owner of this apartment. Patricia works for my company. The silence in the room was absolute. Trevor had gone white as paper. Margaret Bennett spoke first, her voice shaking. Gabrielle, dear, I don't understand. You own this apartment. I do. I purchased it 2 years ago as part of my real estate portfolio. I've owned it outright since the closing. I walked further into the space, gesturing around. I invested the $500,000 your family so generously gave us 8 years ago. Turned it into what's now a $52 million property empire. This apartment was one of my prize acquisitions. Robert Bennett stared at me. You've built a $50 million portfolio? From the money we gave you to invest. $52 million as of last quarter, yes. I've been meaning to show you the returns, but Trevor always said you preferred not to be bothered with details. I have all the documentation, of course. Every property purchased, every transaction completed, all under my corporation. I can provide complete transparency on how your initial investment grew. Your corporation, Thomas Wright said slowly. Not a joint investment? That's correct. The money was given to me to invest. I invested it well. Very well. All legally under my name and my company. I pulled out my phone and opened a file, handing it to Robert Bennett. Here's a summary of the portfolio. You'll notice the Riverside penthouse at the top of the list. Purchase price, $20 million. Current appraised value, $24 million. Purchased on March 15th, 2 years ago. While Robert Bennett scrolled through the document, his expression shifting from shock to something like awe, I finally looked directly at Trevor. So you see, darling husband, when you told Courtney that you'd closed on this apartment last week, that was incorrect. When you told her you'd gotten it for a steal at $20 million, that was also incorrect. And when you promised her this was going to be your home together, that was perhaps the most incorrect statement of all. Because this apartment has always been mine. Courtney stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Trevor, what is she talking about? You said you bought this place. You said it was ours. Trevor couldn't seem to form words. Let me save you the trouble of lying, I said, my voice pleasant but sharp as glass. Trevor doesn't own this apartment. He doesn't own any apartment. What Trevor does own is approximately $270,000 in credit card debt, 2 offshore bank accounts with hidden money, and a very thorough paper trail of embezzled funds from his family's company. Isn't that right, darling? Margaret Bennett had tears in her eyes now. Trevor, tell me this isn't true. Tell me you haven't been stealing from the company. I haven't been stealing, Trevor said desperately. Those were legitimate business expenses. James Peterson pulled out his own phone. I'd like to see documentation of those legitimate business expenses. Because our new CFO flagged nearly $300,000 in discretionary withdrawals with inadequate documentation over the past 18 months. I think we need to have a serious conversation about this, Trevor. Trevor turned to me, his expression shifting to anger. You set this up. You brought them here on purpose. I invited potential investors to view my property, yes. I had no idea you'd be here with your pregnant mistress, having a romantic champagne brunch in an apartment you don't own. That was all you. Courtney was backing toward the door now, tears streaming down her face. You lied to me. About everything. About the apartment, about the money, about... She pressed her hand to her stomach. About all of it. Baby, wait, Trevor moved toward her. Don't call me that, Courtney sobbed. You're still married. You lied about having money. This isn't even your apartment. What else have you lied about? She ran out of the apartment, her heels clicking rapidly down the hallway. Trevor started after her, but his father's voice stopped him cold. Trevor William Bennett, you stay right there. Trevor froze. I'd never heard Robert Bennett use that tone before, cold and commanding and absolutely furious. You will sit down, Robert continued. You will explain yourself. And then you will listen very carefully to what happens next. Trevor sat, all the fight draining out of him. He looked small suddenly, sitting in my expensive chair at my expensive table in my expensive apartment that he tried to claim as his own. I remained standing, Patricia beside me. The board members gathered around the table. Margaret Bennett stood by her husband, one hand pressed to her mouth. I think, Patricia said quietly, we have a lot to discuss. And I think Trevor has a lot of explaining to do. But first, let's be clear about something. Gabrielle owns this apartment. She owns this building. And based on what I'm hearing, she owns a lot more than anyone in this room realized. Robert Bennett looked at me with something like respect mixed with shock. You built all this? While married to my son? While your son thought I was just playing with numbers, yes. While he dismissed my work as a cute hobby. While he was planning to divorce me and leave me with nothing. I met Robert's eyes steadily. I built an empire. And now everyone gets to see it. Trevor put his head in his hands. Margaret Bennett was crying silently. The board members were already pulling out their phones, no doubt texting the company lawyers. The perfect Saturday morning had turned into Trevor's worst nightmare. And we were just getting started. The conference room at the Bennett Company headquarters had never felt so cold. Monday morning, 9 a.m., I sat at the head of the table with Patricia on my right. Across from us sat Trevor, flanked by two lawyers his family had hired for him. Robert and Margaret Bennett sat at the far end with James Peterson and the company's chief legal counsel. The weekend had been busy. After Saturday's disastrous property viewing, I'd gone back to my hotel while Trevor's family had taken him to their estate for what I could only imagine was the most uncomfortable conversation of his life. Courtney had sent me a text Sunday morning. Apparently, Trevor had given her my number at some point during their affair. I didn't know he was still married. He told me you were separated and the divorce was almost final. I'm sorry for everything. I'm leaving the city. I hadn't responded. Courtney was a symptom, not the disease. She was young and had believed a liar's promises. That wasn't my battle to fight. My battle was here in this conference room with documentation spread across the table. James Peterson spoke first, his voice grim. We've completed a preliminary audit of the discretionary funds Trevor accessed over the past 18 months. The total is $342,000. None of it was properly documented as required by company policy. Trevor's lawyer, an older man named Harrison Ford, no relation to the actor, cleared his throat. My client maintains these were legitimate business expenses. Then he can provide receipts, Patricia said smoothly, sliding a document across the table. Because we've documented where that money actually went. Would you like me to detail it? Trevor slumped in his chair, saying nothing. His face was gray, his expensive suit rumpled. He looked like he hadn't slept since Saturday. Please do, Robert Bennett said. His voice was steel. Patricia opened a folder. $78,000 withdrawn in cash over 14 months. No receipts, no business documentation. Another $90,000 charged to a corporate credit card at luxury retailers, restaurants, and hotels. The hotels are particularly interesting. All rooms were booked for 2 people, none with Trevor's wife present. The remaining $174,000 was transferred to 2 offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Margaret Bennett made a small sound of distress. Robert's jaw tightened. The offshore accounts, Patricia continued, were opened 18 months ago, shortly after Trevor began his relationship with Courtney Anderson. Our investigation suggests he was hiding money from both his family and his wife in preparation for a divorce where he planned to claim minimal assets. Harrison Ford looked at Trevor. Is any of this untrue? Trevor didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. I was going to pay it back. Pay it back, Robert repeated. With what money, Trevor? You've been living on credit cards. You have $270,000 in personal debt. Where exactly did you plan to get $340,000? I have investments, Trevor said weakly. You mean the offshore accounts you were hiding? James Peterson's voice was scathing. The ones with $400,000 that you stole from this company? That money doesn't belong to you, Trevor. It belongs to the company. To your family. To the employees whose retirement funds you've been gambling with. I wasn't gambling. You were stealing, Robert cut him off. Call it what it is. You stole from your family's company to fund an affair while planning to defraud your wife. And you did all of it in an apartment that belonged to Gabrielle. An apartment you somehow didn't realize she owned. The irony of that still amazed me. Trevor had clearly found out about the Riverside penthouse through real estate connections. Someone had probably mentioned a spectacular property in that building. He'd researched enough to know it was owned by Monarch Property Group. But he'd never bothered to research who owned Monarch Property Group. If he had, he'd have found out it was me. He'd have discovered the entire empire I'd built. But Trevor had never taken my work seriously enough to look deeper. He'd assumed Monarch was just some faceless corporation, and he'd found a way to access the apartment, probably bribed a building employee, without ever knowing he was essentially breaking into my property. "Let's talk about the marriage," Patricia said, pulling out another set of documents. "Trevor, when were you planning to file for divorce?" "I don't have to answer that," Trevor muttered. "Actually, you do, because we have documentation showing you consulted a divorce attorney 3 months ago. The attorney's notes are quite interesting. You told him your wife had no significant assets and that you wanted to move quickly to prevent her from discovering your business investments." Direct quote from the legal notes. I watched Trevor's face redden. 3 months ago, I'd still been playing the oblivious wife, traveling for work, and managing my little consulting business. He'd thought I was clueless. Meanwhile, I'd been closing deals that made his supposed investments look like pocket change. "My client?" Harrison Ford began. "Your client?" Patricia interrupted. "Committed fraud. Marital fraud by hiding assets and planning to lie about his financial situation in divorce proceedings. Corporate fraud by embezzling from his family's company. And potentially criminal trespass by accessing property he didn't own. Should I continue?" Harrison Ford looked at Trevor with barely concealed disgust. This was not a client he could defend. "Let's cut to the chase," Robert Bennett said. "Trevor, you're fired from the company effective immediately. The board will be filing charges for embezzlement unless you return every penny you stole, plus interest and penalties. That's not negotiable." Trevor's head snapped up. "Dad, you can't." "I can and I will. You've embarrassed this family. You've stolen from the company my father built. You've lied to your wife, gotten another woman pregnant, and made a mockery of everything we stand for. You're done." "I'll have nothing," Trevor said, his voice breaking. "No job, no money, nowhere to go." "You'll have exactly what you deserve," Margaret Bennett said coldly. "Which is nothing. You wanted to leave Gabrielle with nothing. Congratulations, you've succeeded in leaving yourself with nothing instead." I spoke for the first time since the meeting began. "I'll be filing for divorce this afternoon. My attorney has prepared all the paperwork. The prenup you insisted on will be honored. It protects separate assets acquired during the marriage. Since my entire portfolio was built separately using funds legally entrusted to me, none of it is marital property. You'll have no claim to any of it." "Gabriel, please?" Trevor turned to me, desperation in his eyes. "We can work this out. Was a mistake. I can explain." "No," I said simply. "You can't explain lying to me for months. You can't explain stealing from your family. You can't explain bringing your pregnant mistress into my apartment and promising her my life. There's no explanation that makes any of that acceptable. But we've been married for 8 years. Yes, we have. 8 years during which you dismissed my work, patronized my intelligence, and assumed I was too stupid to notice you were planning to destroy me. 8 years during which I built an empire you knew nothing about because you never bothered to actually see me." I stood, gathering my papers. "The divorce papers will be served tomorrow. The prenup is ironclad, so I don't anticipate this taking long. I'll keep everything I built. You'll keep the debt you've accumulated and the consequences of your choices." "What am I supposed to do?" Trevor asked, and for the first time, I heard genuine fear in his voice. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Figure it out. The way I had to figure out how to build a life when you gave me $500,000 and forgot about it. The way I had to figure out how to be worth something when you treated me like a decorative accessory. The way Courtney will have to figure out how to raise a baby alone because you lied to her too." Patricia stood with me. "The offshore accounts will be turned over to the company as restitution. The credit card debt is your responsibility. And Trevor, I'd strongly suggest you cooperate fully with the company's investigation. Otherwise, this becomes a criminal matter, and you'll be dealing with prosecutors instead of family lawyers." We walked out of the conference room, leaving Trevor sitting with his lawyers and his furious parents. In the hallway, Patricia turned to me with a slight smile. "How do you feel?" "Relieved," I said. And I meant it. I thought I'd feel vindictive or angry. But mostly I just feel relieved that it's over. It's not quite over. The divorce still has to be finalized. That's just paperwork. The marriage has been over for years. I just didn't admit it until now. My phone buzzed. A text from James Morrison, my private investigator. Courtney Anderson returned to her hometown in Ohio. Moved in with her parents. FYI, she's been posting on social media about learning hard lessons about trusting the wrong men. Doesn't mention Trevor by name, but the timing is obvious. At least Courtney had family support. That was more than Trevor deserved, but I couldn't help feeling a small amount of sympathy for her. She'd made bad choices, yes, but she'd also been lied to by someone who was supposed to be an authority figure in his own life. What now? Patricia asked as we walked to the elevator. Now? I pressed the button for the ground floor. Now I go back to my office and run my business. I have 3 properties closing this week, one of which will net me nearly $2 million in profit. I have a foundation to establish for women entrepreneurs. And I have an apartment to sell. The Riverside penthouse? Yes. I can't stay there now knowing Trevor brought her there. It's tainted. But that's fine. I'll sell it and use the profit to buy something even better. Something that was mine from the beginning with no connections to him at all. The elevator doors opened. We stepped inside and I looked at my reflection in the polished metal doors. I looked the same as I had Saturday morning, professional, composed, powerful. But I felt different. Lighter. Free. Trevor had tried to take everything from me while giving me nothing. Instead, I'd taken everything from him while keeping everything I'd built. The irony was beautiful. The justice was perfect. And the best part? I'd done it all legally, methodically, and without ever once compromising my integrity. I'd simply revealed the truth. The empire I'd built. The fraud he'd committed. The lies he'd told. The truth had been enough to destroy him. Because the truth was that I'd always been the powerful one in our marriage. I just stopped pretending otherwise. The text came at 11:58 a.m., just as I was reviewing contracts in my office. Guests arriving now. I saved my work and pulled up the security camera feeds on my laptop. Time to watch Trevor's world continue its spectacular collapse. Patricia stood in the Riverside penthouse lobby, greeting Trevor's parents and the board members. Everyone was dressed professionally again. This was a serious business meeting disguised as a property viewing follow-up. After Saturday's disaster, the Bennett family wanted answers. They wanted documentation. They wanted to understand exactly how the daughter-in-law they dismissed had built an empire under their noses. I'd prepared a comprehensive presentation. Financial statements showing the growth of their initial $500,000 investment into my current $52 million portfolio. Property acquisitions listed chronologically with purchase prices, renovation costs, sale prices or rental income. Tax returns proving everything was legitimate and properly reported. The full story of Monarch Property Group, built one smart decision at a time while Trevor wasn't paying attention. But first they were getting a full tour of the crown jewel, the apartment Trevor had tried to steal. I watched Patricia lead them through the space. As you can see, this is approximately 4,000 square feet of luxury living space. Floor-to-ceiling windows with 360-degree city views. Custom Italian marble in the kitchen and bathrooms. Smart home technology throughout. The building itself has 24-hour security, a rooftop garden, a fitness center, and concierge service. It's spectacular, Margaret Bennett said quietly. She looked tired, older than she had on Saturday. Finding out your son was an embezzler and a cheater in the same day would do that. Robert Bennett ran his hand along the granite kitchen counter. And Gabrielle purchased this 2 years ago? Yes, sir. March 15th, 2 years ago. $20 million paid in full from Monarch Property Group accounts. No mortgage, no loans. The company had the capital to purchase it outright. Patricia pulled out a tablet and showed them the closing documents. Here's the deed. You'll see Monarch Property Group listed as the owner. Gabrielle Bennett as the sole proprietor of Monarch Property Group. James Peterson took the tablet and scrolled through the documents. This is legitimate. Everything's properly filed, properly documented. She actually owns this. She actually built all of it, Patricia corrected. The $52 million portfolio. Every property was purchased legally, renovated when necessary, and either sold for profit or maintained as rental income. Gabrielle has been running a successful real estate investment company for 8 years. Your son just didn't know it. Because he never asked, Margaret said softly. He never took her work seriously. He thought she was playing at being a businesswoman. While she was actually being better at business than he ever was, James Peterson said. There was respect in his voice now. This portfolio is extraordinary. The return on investment is nearly 10,000% over 8 years. That's remarkable even by aggressive investment standards. Patricia smiled. Gabrielle has a talent for identifying undervalued properties and knowing exactly how to improve them for maximum profit. She also has excellent timing, buying before neighborhoods appreciate, selling at market peaks. She turned your initial investment into generational wealth. Generational wealth that Trevor tried to claim as his own, Robert said bitterly. Did he really think he could get away with it? That no one would notice? He wasn't thinking at all, Patricia replied. He saw an opportunity, a spectacular apartment he wanted to show his mistress. He found out it was owned by a corporation. He probably bribed someone in the building to get access, then told Courtney he'd purchased it. He never bothered to research who actually owned that corporation because he assumed his wife couldn't possibly have built anything this substantial. The tour continued through the bedrooms, the bathrooms, the private balcony overlooking the city. I watched Margaret Bennett's face as she took in the paint samples still sitting on the counter in the second bedroom, the room Courtney had planned to make into a nursery. He brought her here, Margaret said. Multiple times. Planning a future with her in a home that belonged to his wife. The betrayal is... She trailed off, unable to finish. Comprehensive, Robert finished for her. The betrayal is comprehensive. Of Gabrielle, of us, of the company, of basic decency. Our son has become someone I don't recognize. They moved to the living room, where Patricia had set up a full presentation on a large monitor. I know you came here today for answers. Gabrielle wanted me to walk you through exactly how she built this empire, so there are no questions about legitimacy or method. For the next hour, I watched Patricia walk Trevor's family through every detail of my business. The initial property purchase, that foreclosed duplex I'd bought for $200,000 and sold for $400,000. The next investments, each one carefully researched and strategically timed. The creation of Monarch Property Group as a legal corporation. The expansion into multiple states. The rental income that had become a steady revenue stream. She showed them properties I'd purchased and renovated with my own hands in the early days, when I couldn't afford contractors. Properties I'd sold at the perfect moment, right before market corrections. Properties I'd held long-term that had tripled in value. Every decision, every investment, every risk had been calculated and careful. She never gambled, Patricia said. She researched. She planned. She executed. That's why the portfolio is so successful. And it's why Trevor never understood what she was doing. He'd always relied on his family name and quick deals. Gabrielle was building something sustainable. Robert Bennett sat down heavily on the couch. We gave her $500,000 8 years ago and forgot about it. We told her to invest it wisely, and then we never asked about it again. Because Trevor told you not to bother her with questions, Patricia said gently. He said she was handling it, that it was boring financial stuff. He wanted you to think he was overseeing everything when in reality, he hadn't looked at the investments once. He told us the money was in index funds, Margaret said. Safe, boring index funds earning steady returns. The money was in real estate earning exceptional returns, Patricia corrected. Gabrielle sent annual reports to this address every year. Detailed reports showing the portfolio's growth. Did you ever see them? Robert and Margaret looked at each other. No, Robert said slowly. Trevor handled all the mail from Gabrielle's business. He said he reviewed everything and it was all fine. We trusted him. He was intercepting the reports, Patricia said, and probably throwing them away without reading them. If he had read them, he'd have known his wife was building wealth that dwarfed his own income. He'd have known she was smarter and more successful than he'd ever given her credit for. James Peterson was still scrolling through financial documents on the tablet. This is going to sound cold, but from a business perspective, Bennett Company should have been working with Gabrielle, not Trevor. Her investment acumen is clearly superior. The decisions she's made, the timing, the risk assessment, all of it shows sophisticated financial understanding. We'd be happy to discuss potential collaboration, Patricia said smoothly. Gabrielle has been considering expanding Monarch Property Group to include investment partnerships with established firms. Obviously, the current family situation complicates that, but in the future, there might be opportunities. I smiled, watching the presentation through my laptop. Patricia was brilliant. She was turning this disaster into a potential business opportunity while simultaneously showing Trevor's family exactly what they'd lost by dismissing me. What happens now? Margaret asked. With the divorce, I mean. Trevor will fight for his share of the assets, won't he? He can try, Patricia said. But the prenup is clear. Assets acquired separately during the marriage remain separate. Gabrielle built Monarch Property Group entirely on her own, using funds that were legally given to her to invest. Trevor's name appears nowhere on any of the paperwork. He has no legal claim to any of it. So he'll leave the marriage with nothing, Robert said. Technically, he'll leave with his credit card debt and the legal obligation to repay the money he embezzled from your company. So actually, he'll leave with less than nothing. The room was quiet. I could see Margaret Bennett wiping tears from her eyes. Robert stared out the window at the city view, his jaw tight. We should have paid more attention, Margaret finally said. To both of them. To what Trevor was really doing. To what Gabrielle was accomplishing. We failed them both. You trusted your son, Patricia said. That's not a failure. Trevor's choices are his own. But we could have seen this coming. The warning signs must have been there. They were, James Peterson said quietly. The company's accountants had been flagging irregularities in Trevor's expense reports for months. I ignored it because he was family. That was my mistake. We gave him too much benefit of the doubt. Patricia began shutting down the presentation. Gabrielle wanted you to have this information so you could understand the full picture. She's not interested in destroying Trevor or hurting your family. She just wants the truth to be known and to move forward with her life. She's being far more gracious than Trevor deserves, Robert said. After everything he's done, she could have pressed charges herself. Criminal trespass at minimum. Possibly fraud. She could have, Patricia agreed. But that's not who she is. She'd rather focus on building her business and helping other women achieve financial independence. In fact, she's planning to launch a foundation to provide education and resources for women starting their own ventures. Margaret looked up. A foundation? Yes. Women like Gabrielle who had to build wealth quietly because their partners didn't take them seriously. She wants to create opportunities and community for female entrepreneurs. The foundation will offer workshops, mentorship, and potentially seed funding for promising ventures. I watched Margaret's expression shift from sadness to something like determination. I want to help. With the foundation. I've spent my whole life supporting my husband's business, but I've never built anything of my own. I'd like to be part of something that empowers other women. Patricia looked surprised. Genuinely surprised, not professionally surprised. I'll pass that along to Gabrielle. I'm sure she'd welcome your involvement. The viewing ended shortly after that. Trevor's family gathered their things and prepared to leave. As they reached the door, Robert turned back to look at the apartment one more time. This could have been Trevor's, he said. Not the apartment itself, but what it represents. Success. Respect. Building something real. He had every advantage and he threw it all away for lies and shortcuts. Some people never learn to value what they have until they lose it, Patricia said. Unfortunately, by then it's too late. They left and I watched Patricia lock up the apartment. She pulled out her phone and texted me. That went even better than expected. Margaret wants to help with the foundation. Robert is seriously impressed with your business acumen. And James Peterson mentioned potential investment partnerships. You've turned a disaster into opportunity. I texted back, good. That's what I do. Turn disasters into opportunities. Because that's exactly what Trevor had given me, the opportunity to stop hiding my success. The opportunity to show everyone what I'd really built. The opportunity to step fully into my power without apology. Trevor had thought bringing his mistress to his apartment would be the beginning of his new life. Instead, it had been the end of everything he'd known and the beginning of everything I'd been working toward. Perfect timing. Perfect justice. Perfect outcome. The divorce papers were served to Trevor on Wednesday morning at his apartment. A modest 2-bedroom he was now renting after being kicked out of our marital home. That property had been in his family's name, and they'd wasted no time reclaiming it. Trevor's belongings had been boxed up and left in storage. He'd had to scramble to find somewhere to live with his credit cards maxed out and no job. I knew all this because James Morrison, my private investigator, kept me updated. Not because I was vindictive, but because knowledge was protection. I needed to know if Trevor was planning any kind of retaliation or legal challenge. According to James, Trevor had spent the first 2 days after our confrontation trying to reach Courtney. She'd blocked his number. He tried to access the Riverside penthouse again and had been stopped by security. I'd made sure everyone in that building knew Trevor Bennett was not authorized on the property under any circumstances. He'd even tried to go to his parents' house and had been turned away at the gate. Now, sitting in my office reviewing the divorce paperwork, I felt nothing but relief. The papers were straightforward. No contest, no fight, just the clean division that the prenup stipulated. Trevor would keep whatever personal assets he'd brought into the marriage, which at this point was basically his car and his clothes. I would keep everything I'd built. My phone rang. Patricia. The papers were delivered, she confirmed. Trevor signed them within an hour. No arguments, no requests for negotiation. He knows he has no ground to stand on. How long until it's final? In this state, with both parties agreeing and no contested assets, we can have it done in 3 months. Maybe less if we push. 3 months. After 8 years of marriage, 3 months to make it officially over. The math felt wrong somehow, but life was rarely proportional. There's something else, Patricia said, her tone shifting. I got a call from Trevor's attorney this morning. Harrison Ford wants to meet with us. Says Trevor wants to talk. Talk about what? There's nothing to discuss. That's what I said. But Harrison was insistent. He says Trevor has information he thinks you need to know. Something about protecting yourself. I frowned. That sounds like a trap. That's what I thought too. But Harrison seemed genuine. And honestly, what can Trevor do at this point? He has no leverage, no power, nothing to negotiate with. It might be worth hearing what he has to say. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We scheduled the meeting for Friday afternoon at Patricia's office. Neutral territory where I'd have my attorney present and everything would be recorded. Friday arrived cold and rainy. I dressed in my favorite charcoal suit again, armor for whatever this meeting would bring. Patricia's office was in a sleek high-rise downtown, all glass and steel and impressive city views. The conference room where we met was deliberately intimidating, designed to remind clients that Patricia was not someone to mess with. Trevor arrived exactly on time with Harrison Ford. He looked terrible. The expensive suit he wore hung loose on him like he'd lost weight. His face was drawn, dark circles under his eyes. He wouldn't meet my gaze when he entered the room. Thank you for meeting with us, Harrison said formally. We all sat, Trevor and Harrison on one side of the table, Patricia and me on the other. Let's make this quick, Patricia said. What information does Trevor supposedly have that my client needs to know? Trevor finally looked up at me. I want to start by saying I'm sorry. For everything. The affair, the lies, the apartment, all of it. I was wrong. Spectacularly wrong. I said nothing. An apology wasn't why we were here. Trevor continued, I know you don't want to hear this from me, and I don't deserve your forgiveness. But there's something you need to know. Something that's going to come out, and I wanted you to hear it from me first. Get to the point, Patricia said sharply. Harrison opened a folder and slid a document across the table. This is a report from the Bennett Company's forensic accountant. It details all of Trevor's financial improprieties over the past 18 months. The embezzlement, the hidden accounts, all of it. We know about all of this already, I said. You know about the $342,000, Trevor said. What you don't know is that the company is planning to press criminal charges. They're not giving me the option to just pay it back anymore. My father wants me prosecuted. I felt no sympathy. You stole from your family's company. That's a crime. Of course there are consequences. I know. And I deserve it. But here's what you need to understand. When this goes to trial, everything comes out. All the financial records, all the investigations, all of it becomes public. Including details about the money my parents gave us 8 years ago. I went still. What about it? Harrison spoke carefully. The $500,000 the Bennett family gave to Trevor and Gabrielle was technically a loan, not a gift. The paperwork from 8 years ago lists it as a loan to be repaid over time, interest-free, but still legally structured as a loan. That's not true, I said immediately. It was a gift. Trevor's father said it was to give us a proper start. Verbally, yes, Harrison said. But the legal documents say otherwise. The Bennett family's attorneys were very careful about the paperwork. All family money disbursements are structured as loans for tax purposes. It's standard practice for wealthy families. Patricia was already pulling out her own files. Let me see that original documentation. Harrison slid over more papers. Patricia read through them, her expression darkening. After several long minutes, she looked at me. They're right. It's structured as a loan. Repayment terms are vague, basically at the family's discretion, but it's definitely a loan, not a gift. My mind raced. So what does that mean? It means, Trevor said quietly, that technically you owe my family $500,000. And when the criminal trial happens, my father's attorneys are going to use every possible angle to recover money. They're going to come after that loan repayment. They're going to claim that the $52 million you built was built using money that wasn't legally yours to invest. That's not true, I said, anger rising. They gave me that money to invest. They told me to make it grow. I did exactly what they asked. I know, Trevor said. And I've tried to explain that to my father. But he's furious. Not just at me, at everyone. He feels betrayed by both of us. And his lawyers are telling him that if he pursues the loan repayment, he could potentially claim a percentage of your portfolio since it was all built from that original investment. That's ridiculous, Patricia said. The statute of limitations on debt collection. There is no statute of limitations on documented loans between family members, Harrison interrupted. I checked. And the Bennett family's documentation is very thorough. I looked at Trevor. Really looked at him. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know what's coming. Because for all my failures, I don't want you to be ambushed by my father's attorneys. And because, he took a breath. Because you built something extraordinary and it would be wrong if my mistakes destroyed that too. Patricia was already making notes. We'll fight this. Gabrielle acted in good faith. She was told to invest the money and she did so brilliantly. No court is going to punish her for being successful with funds she was explicitly told to manage. Maybe not, Harrison said. But defending against it will be expensive. And the publicity will be brutal. Wife builds empire with husband's family money while planning divorce, is going to be the headline. It won't matter that the timeline is wrong or that you didn't know about the loan structure. The story will be that you used their money to leave their son. The room was silent. I felt the careful empire I'd built, the justice I'd achieved, suddenly becoming shaky ground. Trevor spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm going to plead guilty to the embezzlement charges. I'm not fighting it. And when I do, I'm going to make a statement to the court about the $500,000. I'm going to explain that my parents explicitly told you to invest that money however you saw fit. That they never asked for repayment or indicated it was a loan. That you acted in complete good faith. Why would you do that? I asked. Because it's the truth. And because you deserve better than to have your success questioned. You built that empire through your own intelligence and hard work. The fact that the seed money came from my family doesn't diminish what you accomplished. I studied his face, looking for the catch, the angle, the manipulation. But all I saw was exhaustion and what looked like genuine regret. There's something else, Trevor continued. I've been talking to Courtney. She finally agreed to speak with me after I sent her a letter apologizing and taking full responsibility. She's struggling. Single, pregnant, living with her parents in a small town where everyone knows what happened. She doesn't have money for a good lawyer to help with custody arrangements or child support documentation. And you want me to help her? I couldn't keep the disbelief out of my voice. No, Trevor said quickly. No, I would never ask that. But I wanted you to know that I'm signing away my parental rights. I'm not going to be in that child's life. It wouldn't be fair to him to have a father who's going to prison and who can't provide stability or support. Courtney deserves to move on without me complicating things. Patricia leaned forward. Let me be very clear about something, Trevor. Your guilty plea and your statement about the loan, those protect Gabrielle legally. But they also mean you're going to prison for a very long time. Embezzling over $300,000 from a family business carries serious penalties. You understand that? I understand, Trevor said. I deserve it. I stole from my family. I betrayed my wife. I lied to a woman who trusted me and got her pregnant under false pretenses. Prison is probably the least of what I deserve. And the statement you make about the loan, Patricia continued, that can't be contingent on anything. You can't expect Gabrielle to help you or advocate for you or do anything in return. You make that statement because it's true, not because you want something from her. I don't want anything from her, Trevor said. I just want to do one thing right before everything crashes down. We talked for another hour, going through details and documentation. Harrison Ford provided copies of everything. The loan paperwork, the forensic accounting reports, the emails between Trevor and the company attorneys. Patricia made arrangements to coordinate with Trevor's legal team about the timing of his guilty plea and statement. When the meeting finally ended, Trevor and Harrison left first. I sat in the conference room with Patricia, trying to process everything. Do you believe him? I finally asked. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. I think he's reached the end of his rope and realized that destroying you doesn't save him. Whether that's actual remorse or just pragmatism, I can't say. But the statement he's offering to make, that could save you a lot of legal headaches. But I still owe $500,000 to his family. Technically, yes. But after Trevor's statement, after the courts hear that you invested in good faith with explicit instructions from the Bennett family, no judge is going to force you to hand over a percentage of your portfolio. At worst, you'll have to repay the original $500,000. Which, given your current net worth, is manageable. Manageable. I turned that money into $52 million, and now I might have to give back the original investment. It felt like losing, even though mathematically I was still coming out incredibly far ahead. What happens now? I asked. Now you go back to running your empire. Trevor faces his consequences. And we make sure your foundation launches on schedule. Don't let this derail what you've built, Gabrielle. You did nothing wrong. You took money you were told to invest and you invested it brilliantly. That's not a crime. That's not even morally questionable. That's just success. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to feel the same confidence I'd felt on Saturday when Trevor's world had collapsed in my apartment. But the reality was more complicated now. The story wasn't as clean. The victory wasn't as absolute. Trevor was going to prison, yes. But I was going to spend the next year defending my success, explaining my choices, and possibly writing a $500,000 check to a family that had dismissed me for 8 years. Life, it turned out, was rarely as simple as the revenge fantasy. Justice was rarely as clean as I'd imagined. And winning sometimes meant accepting that you'd won less than you'd thought you had. But I'd still won. Even with complications, even with legal battles ahead, I'd still built something extraordinary from nothing. I'd still proven everyone who'd underestimated me wrong. And I was still standing when Trevor's world had crumbled. That would have to be enough. 6 weeks had passed since the meeting in Patricia's office. 6 weeks of legal proceedings, media attention, and careful reputation management. Trevor's guilty plea had made headlines. Bennett family heir pleads guilty to embezzling over $300,000, ran in the business section of every major paper. But his statement to the court had also made news. Standing before a judge, dressed in a cheap suit he'd bought from a discount store, Trevor had explained about the $500,000 investment. My family gave Gabrielle Bennett money to invest 8 years ago, he'd said, his voice steady despite the cameras. They told her to make it grow, to manage it wisely. They never indicated it was a loan. They never asked for accounting of how she used it. She believed it was a gift to both of us, a start to our married life. She invested that money with extraordinary skill and built it into something remarkable. The fact that I later betrayed her, that I stole from my own family, that I lied to everyone around me, none of that diminishes what she accomplished. She acted in complete good faith with funds she was explicitly told to manage. The statement had taken the wind out of Robert Bennett's legal team. They'd planned to pursue the loan repayment, to argue that my portfolio had been built on their money. But with Trevor's public statement, with his admission that I'd been told to invest the money however I saw fit, their case had weakened significantly. Patricia had negotiated a settlement. I would repay the original $500,000, but nothing more. No interest, no claims on my portfolio, no percentage of my profits. Just the original investment returned in full. It stung writing that check. Not because I couldn't afford it. $500,000 was less than 2% of my net worth now. But because it felt like being punished for success. Like being told that turning $500,000 into $52 million was somehow wrong because the seed money had come from people who'd dismissed me. But I'd written the check. I'd repaid the debt. And I'd moved on. The divorce had finalized exactly 3 months after I'd filed. No contest, no fight, just signatures on paperwork and the end of 8 years of marriage. I was officially Gabrielle Bennett, single woman. Technically I could drop the Bennett name, but I'd kept it. I'd built Monarch Property Group as Gabrielle Bennett. Changing it now felt like running from something I wasn't ashamed of. Trevor was in prison now. 18 months, minimum security facility. He'd be eligible for early release in 12 months with good behavior. Not a long sentence by some standards, but enough to destroy any career prospects he might have had. His family had cut him off financially. Margaret had told me at one of the foundation meetings, yes, she was still involved, that they'd decided tough love was necessary. Trevor would have nothing when he got out except the consequences of his choices. Courtney had her baby. A boy, born healthy and beautiful according to the single photo she'd posted on social media before making her account private. Starting our new life, the caption had said. Just me and my son building something real. No mention of Trevor. No anger or bitterness in the caption, just determination. I thought about reaching out to her. About offering some kind of support, maybe resources about single motherhood or financial planning. But Patricia had advised against it. Let her move on, she'd said. You reaching out, no matter how well-intentioned, will just remind her of the worst period of her life. Let her heal. So I'd let it go. Courtney would figure out her path the same way I'd figured out mine, through necessity and determination and the refusal to let one bad man define her entire life. The Riverside penthouse had sold quickly once I'd listed it. $24 million, a $4 million profit from my original purchase. The buyer was a tech executive relocating from California who'd fallen in love with the views and the building's amenities. The closing had been bittersweet. That apartment represented both my greatest success and my worst betrayal. Selling it had felt like closing a chapter. With the proceeds, I'd purchased something better. A stunning modern house in the hills outside the city, all glass and light and privacy. 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, an office for my work, and a guest house that I was converting into a teaching space for the foundation workshops. It was mine from the start, no complicated history, no tainted memories. Just clean space where I could build the next phase of my life. The foundation had officially launched last month. Monarch Rising, Empowering Women Entrepreneurs. The name had come to me one night while reviewing business plans. Monarch like my company. Rising like what I'd done and what I wanted other women to do. Margaret Bennett had thrown herself into the foundation work with surprising energy. She donated a significant amount of her personal money, not family money, she'd been very clear about that, but her own inheritance that she'd always kept separate. She attended every workshop, mentored several of the women, and had become an advocate for financial independence within her social circle. I spent 40 years supporting my husband's business, she told me over coffee one morning. I was the perfect corporate wife. Hosted dinners, made connections, smiled at investors. But I never built anything that was mine. Watching you made me realize what I'd missed. It's not too late, I'd said. You're building this with me now. I am. And it feels good. It feels like I'm finally doing something that matters beyond looking good in photographs. The foundation had helped 12 women launch businesses in its first month. Small ventures mostly, a catering company, a boutique, an online store selling handmade jewelry. But each one represented a woman taking control of her financial future. Each one was a seed that could grow into something substantial. I was teaching a workshop on property investment next week. 20 women had signed up, eager to learn how to buy their first rental property or flip their first house. I'd been preparing the curriculum for weeks, trying to distill 8 years of learning into practical steps someone could actually follow. The publicity around Trevor's case had been challenging but ultimately beneficial for the foundation. Wife builds $52 million empire while husband embezzles and cheats had been the basic narrative. The story had resonated with people, particularly women who'd been dismissed or underestimated by their partners. I'd done a few interviews carefully selected with Patricia's approval. A business magazine profile titled, The Quiet Success. A podcast about women in real estate. A television appearance on a morning show where the host had been more interested in the dramatic betrayal story than my business acumen, but I'd steered it back to talking about financial independence. The best revenge is success, I'd said on that show. Not because you're trying to hurt anyone, but because building something meaningful for yourself is more satisfying than tearing someone else down. The clip had gone viral. Apparently that sentiment had struck a chord. Now, sitting in my new home office with paperwork spread across my desk, I reviewed the latest portfolio statements. $51 million, technically down from 52 after repaying the Bennett family. But I was already making that back. 2 new properties were under contract, both with significant profit potential. Rental income was steady across all my properties. The foundation was growing. Everything I'd built was intact. Better than intact, it was expanding. My phone rang. I checked the caller ID and smiled. Hey Daniel. Hey yourself. Still on for dinner tonight? Absolutely. 7 o'clock. Perfect. I'll pick you up. Daniel. That had been an unexpected development. We'd reconnected 3 months ago when I'd hired his contracting company to renovate the guest house at my new property. He'd been professional and skilled, but more than that, he'd been genuinely interested in my work. He'd asked questions about property investment, about the foundation, about my plans for the future. He'd listened to my answers like they mattered. We'd gone for coffee after the renovation was complete. Then dinner. Then a weekend trip to the coast where we'd walked on the beach and talked about everything and nothing. It wasn't serious yet. Maybe it wouldn't become serious. But it was easy and comfortable and respectful in a way my marriage to Trevor had never been. Daniel saw me as an equal. More than that, he saw me as someone remarkable. Not because I'd survived betrayal, but because I'd built something extraordinary from opportunity. He respected my ambition. He celebrated my success. And he never once tried to diminish what I'd accomplished. Different from Trevor? Patricia had asked one day when I'd mentioned him. Completely, I'd said. Trevor wanted an accessory. Daniel wants a partner. I wasn't rushing into anything. My divorce was still fresh, my life was still rebuilding. But having someone who genuinely supported what I was doing felt good. It felt healthy. It felt like what I deserved after years of being dismissed. An email notification pinged on my laptop. A message from the Foundation's program director. Gabrielle, you need to see this application for the business grant program. This woman's story is incredible. I opened the attachment. The application was from a woman named Rachel, 42 years old, recently divorced, with a business plan for a consulting firm helping other women navigate separation and rebuild their financial lives. Her story was familiar. Husband who'd controlled the finances, who'd made her feel incompetent, who'd tried to leave her with nothing. But she'd fought back, learned about money and investing, and wanted to help others do the same. I read through her detailed business plan, impressed by the research and thought she'd put into it. At the bottom of the application, she'd written a personal statement. I saw Gabrielle Bennett's interview where she talked about success being the best revenge. That resonated with me because I realized I'd been so focused on what my ex-husband took from me that I hadn't thought about what I could build for myself. This business plan represents my future, not defined by what I lost but by what I'm creating. I want to help other women realize they have more power than they think they do. Just like Gabrielle showed all of us. I sat back in my chair, something warm expanding in my chest. This was why the foundation mattered. Not just because I could afford to fund it, but because my story, messy and complicated and imperfect as it was helping other women see possibilities they hadn't seen before. I replied to the program director, approve the grant, and ask Rachel if she'd be willing to speak at our next workshop. I think our participants would benefit from hearing her story. My phone rang again. Margaret Bennett. Gabrielle, darling, I have wonderful news. The corporate sponsorship from Henderson Group came through. They're committing $2 million over 3 years to the foundation. That's fantastic. It is. And there's more. Henderson Group's CEO wants to meet with you personally. She's interested in discussing potential real estate investments with Monarch Property Group. Apparently she's been following your success. Another opportunity. Another door opening. Another chance to expand what I'd built. Set up the meeting, I said. Next week if possible. After I hung up, I stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows in my office. The view showed rolling hills and forest, privacy and peace. My new home. My clean slate. My foundation for whatever came next. 8 months ago, I'd stood in a coffee shop watching security footage of Trevor bringing his pregnant mistress into my apartment. 8 months ago, I'd been planning revenge, calculating destruction, preparing to tear down everything Trevor thought he'd built. But revenge wasn't what had sustained me through the aftermath. Revenge wasn't what had helped me navigate the legal battles and the media attention and the complicated truth that justice was messy and victory wasn't absolute. What had sustained me was the same thing that had built my empire in the first place. The determination to create something meaningful. The refusal to be diminished. The commitment to use whatever opportunities one had, even opportunities born from betrayal, to build something better. Trevor was in prison. Courtney was raising her baby. The Bennett family was recovering from scandal. And I was here, in my beautiful home, running my successful company, launching a foundation that mattered, and planning dinner with a man who respected me. The fallout from Trevor's betrayal hadn't destroyed me. It had freed me. Freed me to stop hiding my success. Freed me to stop pretending I was less than I was. Freed me to build something even bigger than the empire I'd created in secret. And that freedom, that opportunity to step fully into my power without apology or hesitation, that was worth more than any revenge could ever be. 9 months post-divorce. Spring had arrived with cherry blossoms and longer days and a sense of new beginnings that felt almost too perfect to be real. I stood in the guest house at my property, now officially the Monarch Rising Education Center, watching 25 women arrange themselves in the renovated space. Comfortable chairs, large screens for presentations, working tables for collaboration. Everything designed to make learning about business and finance feel accessible rather than intimidating. Thank you all for coming to our Advanced Property Investment Workshop, I said, moving to the front of the room. I know many of you attended our introductory sessions last month. Today we're going deeper, how to identify emerging markets, how to calculate renovation ROI, how to negotiate with contractors and compete against corporate buyers. The women in the audience were diverse in age, background, and experience. Some were young professionals looking to build wealth early. Others were middle-aged women restarting their lives after divorce or widowhood. A few were older women who'd spent their lives supporting others and were finally investing in themselves. Rachel sat in the front row. She'd spoken at our last workshop, sharing her story of rebuilding after her divorce. Her consulting business was thriving now, She already had 12 clients and a waiting list. She told me last week that she was looking to buy her first investment property. "I want to build an empire like you did," she'd said with a smile. I'd laughed. "Start with one property. The empire comes one smart decision at a time." Now, teaching these women about cash flow analysis and market timing, I felt more fulfilled than I'd ever felt during my 8 years of marriage. This was purpose. This was meaning. This was using my success to create opportunities for others. After the workshop ended, several women stayed behind to ask questions. One woman, maybe 50 years old with gray streaks in her dark hair, approached me last. "Thank you for this," she said simply. "My husband left me 2 years ago. I've been terrified about money ever since. But hearing you explain it all, showing us it's not as complicated as it seems, it makes me think I can actually do this." "You can," I assured her. "You absolutely can. Start small if you need to. But start. That's the most important thing." She smiled, tears in her eyes, and thanked me again before leaving. Margaret Bennett appeared in the doorway after the last woman left. "That was magnificent. You're a natural teacher. Thank you for being here. Where else would I be? This foundation is the most meaningful thing I've ever been part of." She settled into one of the chairs, gesturing for me to join her. "I have updates on the expansion plans." Over the past few months, Margaret and I had been working on growing Monarch Rising beyond just our local area. We'd secured funding for satellite education centers in 3 other cities. We'd partnered with several universities to offer certification programs. We'd created an online platform for women who couldn't attend in-person workshops. The foundation had become bigger than I'd ever imagined during those early planning stages. "The Seattle location is confirmed," Margaret said, pulling out her tablet. "We have the space leased, the director hired, and 12 workshops already scheduled for the fall. Portland and Denver are nearly finalized as well." "That's incredible." "It is. And there's something else I wanted to discuss." Margaret's expression became more serious. "Robert and I have been talking. About Trevor, about everything that happened. We want to make a formal apology to you." I shook my head. "You don't need to apologize for Trevor's choices. Not for his choices. For ours. For dismissing you for 8 years. For never asking about your work or taking your business seriously. For trusting Trevor to handle everything when we should have been paying attention ourselves. You couldn't have known what he was doing. Maybe not. But we could have known what you were doing. We could have celebrated your success. We could have recognized your talent and intelligence. Instead, we treated you like decoration at family dinners. And that was wrong." I was quiet for a moment. "Thank you for saying that. It means something. We also want to do something more concrete." Margaret pulled out a document. "This is a commitment from the Bennett Family Foundation to fund Monarch Rising for the next 5 years. $2 million annually, unrestricted funding that you can use however you see best." I stared at the document. "Margaret, I can't." "You can and you will. This isn't charity. This is investment in something meaningful. And it's Robert's and my way of saying we see you now. We see what you've built. We see what you're capable of. And we're sorry it took our son's catastrophic failure for us to recognize it." I took the document, emotion tightening my throat. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll keep doing what you're doing. Keep empowering women. Keep building. Keep showing everyone what's possible when someone believes in themselves." After Margaret left, I sat alone in the education center, looking at the Bennett Family Foundation commitment. $10 million over 5 years. Enough to expand the foundation significantly. Enough to help hundreds, maybe thousands of women build their own financial independence. From betrayal to this. From Trevor trying to steal my apartment to his family funding my foundation. The transformation was extraordinary. My phone buzzed. "Daniel, how did the workshop go?" "Really well. These women are so eager to learn. It's inspiring." "I'm not surprised. You're inspiring. Listen, I know this might be too soon, but I wanted to ask you something." My heart rate picked up slightly. "Okay." "My company has an opportunity to bid on a major renovation project. A historic building downtown being converted into mixed-use space. Residential on top, commercial on the bottom. But I'd need a financial partner. Someone with experience in property investment and development." I immediately thought of you. I smiled. "Are you asking me to be your business partner?" "I'm asking if you'd consider it. I respect your expertise. I trust your judgment. And I think we'd work well together. No pressure though. If you're not interested or if it's too complicated given that we're also dating, I completely understand. Send me the project details," I said. "Let me look at the numbers." But yes, I'm interested. Very interested. After we hung up, I realized I was genuinely excited about the possibility. Not just because of the project itself, though it sounded promising, but because Daniel had come to me as an equal, asking for partnership rather than rescue or subordination. This was what healthy partnership looked like. Mutual respect. Shared goals. Recognition of each other's strengths. So different from my marriage to Trevor, where I'd had to hide my strengths to avoid threatening his ego. I gathered my materials and locked up the education center. As I walked back to my main house, my phone buzzed with an email notification. The business magazine that had profiled me 6 months ago wanted to do a follow-up story. The Empire Grows, How Gabrielle Bennett Turned Personal Betrayal into Purpose. I'd stopped trying to avoid the betrayal narrative. It was part of my story now, whether I liked it or not. But I'd also learned to control how that story was told. It wasn't about poor victimized wife destroyed by cheating husband. It was about intelligent woman who'd built success in silence, then refused to let betrayal define her future. That narrative had power. It resonated with people. And if my story could help other people, particularly other women, see their own potential, then maybe having my private life exposed was worth it. My mother would have been proud. She'd passed away 4 years ago, before Trevor's betrayal, before the divorce, before the foundation. But she'd known about my real estate investments. She'd been the only one I'd told in those early years, and she'd been delighted. "You're doing exactly what I taught you," she'd said. "Building your own security. Making sure no one can take your power away." "Trevor doesn't know," I'd admitted. "Good. Keep it that way until you're ready to tell him. Some men can't handle their wives being more successful than they are." She'd been right about that. Trevor hadn't just been unable to handle my success. He'd been completely oblivious to it until it was too late. Inside my house, I poured a glass of wine and settled into my home office. The Henderson Group meeting had led to a partnership managing several of their commercial properties. The profit-sharing agreement was generous, and it had introduced me to a network of other female executives and investors. Opportunities were multiplying, each one leading to 3 more. My portfolio was up to $58 million now, recovering from the Bennett family repayment and then some. I just closed on a mixed-use property similar to the one Daniel was proposing, commercial retail on the ground floor, luxury apartments above. The project was already 60% leased before construction was even complete. I was building an empire that felt more solid than ever. But more importantly, I was building a legacy. The foundation would continue long after I was gone. The women I was training would go on to train others. The businesses we were helping launch would employ people, serve communities, create value. That mattered more than any amount of money in my bank account. My phone buzzed again. A text from Trevor's mother. "Trevor is being released early. He wanted me to tell you. He plans to stay in a halfway house and complete his parole in another state. He won't be contacting you. He just wanted you to know he's sorry for everything and he hopes you're well." I stared at the message for a long moment. Trevor, released after 11 months instead of 18. Starting over in a new state with nothing. No family support, no career prospects, no money. Living in a halfway house and trying to rebuild from absolute zero. Part of me felt satisfaction at that. Justice served. Consequences delivered. But mostly I just felt nothing. No anger, no vindication, no residual hurt. Trevor was just a man who'd made terrible choices and was now living with the results. He wasn't my problem anymore. He wasn't even my story anymore. I texted back, "Thank you for telling me. I hope he finds peace." And I meant it. Not because I'd forgiven him or forgotten what he'd done, but because holding on to anger would only hurt me. Trevor had already cost me 8 years. I wasn't giving him any more of my time or energy. I deleted the text thread and went back to reviewing property reports. Later that evening, Daniel arrived for dinner. We ate on my terrace overlooking the hills, talking about the renovation project he wanted to bid on. I reviewed the financials he'd brought, asked questions about construction timelines and subcontractor relationships, calculated potential returns. "You're brilliant at this," Daniel said, watching me work through the numbers. "I've had a lot of practice. Still, the way you see opportunities other people miss, the way you calculate risk, it's impressive." I smiled. "You know what's impressive? That you're not threatened by it. That you asked me to partner with you because of my skills, not despite them. Why would I be threatened by your success? Your success doesn't diminish mine. If anything, partnering with you makes my company stronger. You'd be surprised how many men don't see it that way. Then they're idiots." Daniel reached across the table and took my hand. "You're extraordinary, Gabrielle. Building what you've built, surviving what you survived and then using all of it to help other people. That's who you are. Why would anyone want to diminish that? I squeezed his hand, feeling something warm and hopeful expanding in my chest. Maybe this was what the next chapter looked like. Partnership instead of competition. Support instead of dismissal. Building something together rather than in secret. Let's do it, I said. The renovation project. Send me the partnership proposal and I'll have my attorney review it. But yes, I'm in. Daniel grinned. Really? Really? I think we'll build something amazing together. And looking at him across the table, at the project plans spread between us, at the view of the hills behind him and my beautiful home around us, I believed it. This was what rebuilding looked like. Not revenge, not destruction, not dwelling on past betrayals. But creation, partnership, purpose, building something better than what had been lost. Trevor had tried to take everything from me. Instead, he'd given me the push I'd needed to stop hiding, to reveal my empire, to step fully into my power, to build something that mattered beyond just wealth. That was the real victory. Not that Trevor had lost everything, though he had, but that I'd gained something far more valuable than revenge. I'd gained myself, my voice, my platform, my purpose, and I was just getting started. 1 year after the divorce, the ballroom of the Henderson building, one of the properties I now partially managed, glittered with lights and elegantly dressed people. The Monarch Rising Foundation's first annual gala, celebrating a year of growth, impact, and empowerment. I stood near the entrance in a midnight blue gown, greeting guests as they arrived. Business leaders, philanthropists, the women we'd helped through our programs, media representatives. Everyone who'd been part of the foundation's extraordinary first year. Margaret Bennett arrived with her husband, both dressed formally. Robert approached me first. "Gabrielle," he said, extending his hand. "This is magnificent. You should be very proud. Thank you, Mr. Bennett. And thank you for your family's support. The Bennett Foundation's funding has been transformative." "It's Robert, please. And we're honored to be part of what you're building. I spoke with the Henderson Group CEO last week. She mentioned your management of their properties has increased their portfolio value by 18% in 6 months. That's extraordinary. I have a good team." "You have excellent judgment," Robert corrected. "Which is why I wanted to discuss something with you tonight. Bennett Company is looking to diversify our holdings. We're interested in exploring a real estate division, and frankly, there's no one I'd trust more to consult on that than you." I blinked, surprised. "You want me to consult for Bennett Company?" "I want you to consider becoming a partner in Bennett Company's real estate ventures. Not an employee, a partner. Equal voice, equal profit sharing. Your expertise combined with our capital could be very successful." Margaret touched her husband's arm. "What Robert is trying to say is that we've learned our lesson. We'll never again dismiss someone's talent or capability based on assumptions. We see what you've built and we want to be part of it in the right way." "Let me think about it," I said carefully. "I appreciate the offer and I'm interested. But I'd need to review the partnership structure carefully." "Of course. Take all the time you need." Robert smiled. "We're not going anywhere." As they moved into the ballroom, Daniel appeared at my elbow, looking handsome in his tuxedo. "Was that what I think it was? A business proposition from my ex-husband's family, yes. That's complicated." "Everything is complicated," I said with a smile. "But sometimes complicated is good. Our renovation project is complicated, and it's working beautifully." It was true. The historic building renovation was ahead of schedule and under budget. We'd already pre-leased 80% of the commercial space and had a waiting list for the residential units. The partnership between Daniel's construction expertise and my property management skills had proven to be extraordinarily effective. More than that, our personal relationship had grown steadily stronger. No rushing, no pressure, just two people building something together at their own pace. It was healthy and respectful and nothing like my marriage to Trevor had been. The gala began with a reception where guests mingled and viewed displays showing the foundation's impact. Photographs of women at workshops. Testimonials from the 12 businesses we'd helped launch. Financial data showing how our programs were creating measurable economic empowerment. Rachel stood by one of the displays, talking animatedly with a group of potential donors. Her consulting business had grown so much that she'd just hired 2 employees. She'd also purchased her first investment property, a duplex that she was renovating with help from connections she'd made through the foundation. "She's a success story you should be proud of," Patricia said, appearing beside me with a glass of champagne. "She did the work herself. We just provided resources and community. Don't minimize what you've created here, Gabrielle. This foundation is changing lives. That matters. Patricia had become more than my attorney over the past year. She'd become a friend and an advisor. She served on the foundation's board and had been instrumental in navigating the legal complexities of expansion. How does it feel? Patricia asked. Standing here a year after everything fell apart, looking at what you've built from it? It feels like winning, I said honestly. Not because Trevor lost, but because I gained something real. The formal program began with Margaret Bennett giving the welcome speech. She spoke eloquently about the foundation's mission, about the importance of financial independence for women, and about how her own perspective had shifted over the past year. I spent 40 years as a supportive spouse, she told the crowd, which is a valuable role, but it shouldn't be the only role available to women. Watching Gabrielle build an empire while navigating personal betrayal showed me what's possible when women refuse to be limited by others' expectations. This foundation exists to multiply that possibility for as many women as we can reach. The applause was thunderous. Then it was my turn to speak. I walked to the podium looking out at 200 faces and took a breath. A year ago, I began, I was sitting in my office watching security camera footage of my husband bringing his pregnant mistress into an apartment I owned, an apartment he had no idea belonged to me. In that moment, I could have chosen pure revenge. I could have focused entirely on destroying him. But instead, I chose to build something bigger than my anger. I chose to reveal the empire I'd created in secret and use my story to help other women realize they can build their own empires too. I paused, making eye contact with women throughout the room. Monarch Rising isn't about revenge. It's about transformation. It's about taking whatever situation you're in, whether that's betrayal or loss or simply being dismissed and underestimated, and using it as fuel to build something meaningful. Not in spite of the obstacles, but because of them. I talked about the 12 businesses we'd launched, the 3 satellite locations we were opening, the 500 women who'd gone through our programs, the partnerships we'd formed with corporations and universities, the vision for the next 5 years. Someone asked me recently if I'd do anything differently. I said, if I'd go back and change the past if I could. And the truth is no. Because that painful experience gave me the courage to stop hiding. It forced me to step fully into my power. It led directly to this foundation and everything we're building here. I looked at Margaret Bennett, at Patricia, at Rachel and the other women whose lives had been transformed. At Daniel supporting me from his seat. At the business leaders who'd taken me seriously in ways Trevor never had. The best revenge isn't destruction, I concluded. It's creation. It's building something so meaningful and successful that the person who wronged you becomes irrelevant to your story. That's what this foundation represents. That's what we're helping hundreds of women achieve. And that's what I want to leave as my legacy, not that I survived betrayal, but that I transformed it into opportunity for others. The applause was overwhelming. As I left the podium, women approached me from all directions, sharing their stories, thanking me for the foundation, asking questions about programs and opportunities. This was impact. This was meaning. This was everything I'd hoped to build. Later in the evening, after the formal program ended and guests were mingling again, I stepped outside onto the terrace for a moment of quiet. The city spread out below me, lights twinkling in the darkness. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Saw the coverage of your gala. What you've built is incredible. I'm truly sorry for everything. I hope you know that. Trevor. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed a response. Thank you. I hope you're building something meaningful for yourself too. I didn't block the number, but I also didn't save it. Trevor was my past. He would always be part of my story, the betrayal that forced me to reveal my success, but he wasn't part of my future. My future was this foundation. The properties I was developing with Daniel. The partnership Robert Bennett had proposed. The women I was helping empower. The empire I was continuing to build, but this time in the open with no secrets and no apologies. Daniel joined me on the terrace. Everything okay? More than okay. I leaned into him looking out at the city. I was just thinking about how much has changed in a year. You've built something extraordinary. We've built something extraordinary, I corrected. The renovation project, our partnership, that's ours together. Fair point. He wrapped his arm around my waist. So what's next? More properties? Another foundation location? World domination? I laughed. Maybe all of the above. I've learned not to limit my ambitions. Good. Because watching you dream big and then achieve those dreams is one of my favorite things about you. I turned to look at him. You know what I've learned this year? That the right partner doesn't diminish your success, they amplify it. They celebrate it. They want to build alongside you, not instead of you. Is this your way of saying I'm the right partner? Maybe. I'm also saying I'm glad I didn't let Trevor's betrayal make me afraid of partnership. Because what we have, both business and personal, is so much better than anything I had before. Daniel kissed me softly. To building something better together. Together, I agreed. We went back inside to the gala, to the celebration of everything the foundation had achieved. But I carried that moment with me, that clarity about what I'd learned and what I'd built and who I'd become. Trevor had tried to steal my apartment, my money, my life. Instead, he'd given me the push to claim my power completely. To step out of the shadows and into the spotlight. To transform private success into public impact. The Riverside penthouse was sold and gone. My marriage was ended and irrelevant. Trevor was rebuilding his life in another state far from mine. But I was here. In my beautiful home with my thriving business and my meaningful foundation and my healthy relationship. Building something bigger than myself. Creating opportunities for others. Living fully in my power without apology or hesitation. That was the crown I wore now, not the one Trevor had tried to steal, but the one I'd forged myself through intelligence, determination, and the refusal to be diminished. A crown made of success, of impact, of transformation, of everything I'd built from the ashes of betrayal. And I wore it with pride. The empire was no longer secret. The victory was no longer just mine. I'd taken everything Trevor had tried to destroy and transformed it into something that would outlive us both. A foundation that would empower women for generations, a business that created value and opportunity, a life that proved success was always the best response to betrayal. Trevor had unknowingly given me his pregnant mistress and my apartment as the catalyst for revelation. I'd turned that catalyst into a crown. And I was never taking it off.